Okay, so we are live with the Node.js release working group meeting on the 7th of May 2020. We'll be working from the agenda, which is in issue 575 of the release repo. I'll reshare my screen. You can see it. I guess the first one to go through is the 14x current release plan. If I open that. So I see we've got pretty much people scheduled up to mid-June. And the release 14.2 went out on Tuesday. So I guess, Shelley, you've signed up for one in 2 weeks' time. So we've set a 2-week cadence for our 14x releases. But I guess if there's any interim critical bugs, we will patch those as and when we have time to create the patch releases. Are there any comments or thoughts on our 14x release schedule? No.
Seems fine.
One thing is probably worth raising is on 14.1 and 14.2, there was a commit that seems to break some downstream modules like Jest, I think. It's an intermittent breakage, and it only shows up on the releases that we build. So people, if they build with Visual Studio 2017 locally, they won't ever hit the issue. So it's quite difficult for people to bisect. I know Michael Zasso went and did a bisect on our release builds. So like manually inputted all of our shards to isolate the commit. The commit has been isolated, but we're not sure why it's only breaking when compiled with Visual Studio 2019. I think there was an open suggestion that we revert the commit until we figure out why it's broken when built with Visual Studio 2019. Yeah, I don't know if anyone had seen that. I can try and find it. I think it also breaks Babel, yeah. So yeah, releases were CC'd on a TSC saying, should we revert the commit that's showing this breakage in the next 14 release? I don't know if people want to weigh into that and catch up with the thread in their own time. Nope. Okay, I don't think we need to go for any more on the 14x. And in the release issue, there was the issue raised around in Morocco time zone changes. Miles, I think you mentioned you read through this one. Will it involve cutting releases on all release lines with a patched ICU or something?
Yeah, so I've done this update once before, but honestly, I'd need to get myself back up to date with it. We could dig up and see what we did last time. I believe I documented it, but I could be wrong. I hope I did. But updating the TZ data does not involve updating ICU itself. It's just kind of like its own file. And those need to be updated anytime time zones around the world change their information, or we will essentially give people the wrong time zone data in our ICU data. So this needs to be updated on all lines. I think that where this becomes an interesting question is like, is this the kind of thing that should create a release on maintenance release lines or not? I think we should kind of probably have a consistent policy around that. I think that there's an argument that could be made that having the incorrect time zone data is something that is like a correctness issue, and potentially breaks people's setups. But I don't know if that's something that should justify its own release on like 10, for example. At the very least, we should patch 10 and put a patch up on its staging. We should patch 12, patch 13, patch 14, and get them out in upcoming releases.
My thoughts are kind of like, would it be more disruptive if 10 was returning a different time zone to 12? And it's almost like we need to coordinate so that all the releases kind of go out at roughly the same time. Otherwise, they're going to not have the same time. I can imagine people testing against multiple versions of Node getting weird test results if the time zone is correct in one case and not the other.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say to that would be that 8's going to give the wrong time zone data, since it's not going to get updated and people still test against that. I know that that doesn't fall within our like support contract. I guess it's just more like once something's in maintenance, we want to minimize the number of updates that we do. So, like something I could see, for example, is like having that time zone update on staging, but just waiting until there's a couple more things. So like NAPI updates, I know are also in the pipeline. It would be a shame to do like a release for the time zone data and a release for the NAPI updates. In my personal opinion, I think we should roll those all together as much as possible.
Right. I think there might be an OpenSSL update probably waiting to go out on 10 as well.
Yeah, so now when we say, hey, we're updating OpenSSL and we're updating NAPI and we're updating the time zone data, now that seems like a very, very reasonable release to me, personally.
I guess timing is important because this particular one will be impacted between the 24th of May and the 31st of May. So hopefully we need to get a release out before then for it to have the impact that they want, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if anyone on the call wants to pick this up. I'm just looking really quickly, pardon my typing, for my prior pull request. Oh, there's an update. Sorry. The pull request to update the documentation on it is there. So like here I'm just going to drop a couple things in the chat. Here's like a pull request that I did to 12, updating the time zone data. I reference this pull request, which I'll drop in here, which is the first one, updating the time zone data. And then we have an open PR on documenting the process. What I would say would maybe make sense is, if anyone wants to, here's the process. It's in an open doc. Does anyone want to volunteer for, at the very least, making a pull request against master? But we'll probably need to do a unique pull request against each version of Node, depending on like the versions of ICU. So so 12 has 65.1. 13 has 66.1. We could also use this as an opportunity to update ICU.
Um,
14 has 66.1.
oh, sorry, Miles.
No problem, Shelly. 10 has 64.2. So we're looking at 3 different versions of ICU, although I would say the next 12 that's coming out is a December minor. So I would say we should probably be able to use the same patch against master 14, 13, and 12. The 1 to 12 would include the update to 66.1, although 12 will probably require a different patch than 14 because 14 uses full ICU and 12 uses ICU small.
I've never done this before, but like I'm down to try, so I can take it.
So Shelly, I'm excited to hear that. Just kind of planting a seed. Have you considered automating it?
I would actually. I think there's like some stuff that could be done if we're interested in just like, not necessarily, at least like the portion that can be automated is opening up pull requests and having someone else in green, basically.
Yeah. That would be awesome. In the issue that's open, there's also a link to an RSS feed that's updated whenever the time zone data is updated. So I think that there's the possibility that we could kind of automate the whole pipeline of creating the pull requests when there are updates.
Yeah, so the one question I would have, I guess, is that a lot of like, for example, Electron's bot infrastructure, we tend to just kind of chuck it on Heroku. Does Node have access to any of that? Because like it becomes significantly, I mean, I love GitHub Actions. It just becomes a teeny bit harder within the confines of GitHub Actions than it would be if we had somewhere to just like shove a server.
So we have right now, I mean, this isn't like kind of like part of the official build team's infrastructure, but Node.js.dev is running in a Google Cloud project that I've gotten some credits for. So we could experiment in there if you just want access to cloud infra that's like paid. I know that the build team does have a number of different machines, some of which could potentially host some of this infrastructure. I would say for prototyping, it's kind of fine to throw wherever. But like once we want to put something into production, no matter which service it's on, that's probably something to like go and talk to the build team about to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, like bluntly speaking, I can probably shove like a prototype in Electron's own Heroku like account and then just move it when the time comes because like we just already have that set up and it'd be easy for me to do. For a prototype, that would seem fine.
Yeah, that's the, I personally see, like, I'll put it another way. Like, there's no reason why you can't set up your own automations on your own hardware that open pull requests. There's no rules against that, you know? So I think it makes a ton of sense to just, you know, do it on whatever infrastructure you're most comfortable with and have access to. And then if we have a prototype and we're thinking about, you know, productionizing it and want the foundations team, like our projects team to maintain it, then we can kind of do an evaluation at that point.
Cool. Well, I will take both those tasks then.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Shelly.
Awesome. One thing I was just going to mention, I just remembered I remember someone opened an issue saying updating ICU can break certain people, but I think this is unavoidable.
Yeah, and this is not so this issue, if you could scroll back to the top, if I recall, I know the person who opened this because they had talked to me about it. This is separate from updating the time zone data.
Okay.
But yeah, I think there's a higher level question about, did we have a conclusion from this issue about what we were going to do?
I think, yeah, Stephen Loomis suggested passing the ICU data directory. And then the fact that later versions are built with full ICU means that we shouldn't experience this so much. So it's only really a problem for 10 and 12, I think.
Okay.
I guess that's a question. If people are using full ICU, is that going to, I don't know the answer to this, does that get updated with the latest time zone data? Because anyone using full ICU would not be using the ICU built into with Node.
So the TZ data is, I thought, okay, so two different thoughts. I'm confused. I believe that I thought that when people are using full ICU, like they're using a version of ICU that we've compiled into Node Core. Or are you talking about the full ICU Node module, NPM module?
I'm talking about the NPM module. So for example, if you use 10, that's compiled with small ICU, but you can install the full ICU NPM module to get the full ICU data. I think that's where this issue started coming in, is that if people had done that and then we updated ICU, then obviously the standalone module was at the wrong version and wouldn't automatically update unless you went in and did it yourself.
Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily have an answer.
Yeah.
I believe, but could be wrong, that the time zone data release cadence is separate from the release cadence of ICU itself. Mm-hmm. So while it's possible that if someone's using full ICU and using like a newer version or a different version than what is in core, that they could have, I guess, a more updated version of the TZ data. But
I'm thinking more about the people using the module. So it will be the same version of ICU in theory, but using the data files that are in the module rather than the ones that shipped with Node, because we only ship small ICU on everything 12 and 10, isn't it? It was only 14 that we've got the full ICU built in.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably a question for Stephen, although I would say, even though it's interesting, I'm not sure it makes a difference. Like, we should be updating the time zone data either way, because the time zone data continues to be updated separately.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, though. I'm not trying to dismiss it. I just don't know the answer.
Sure. Okay, but for now, Shelley's volunteered to PR and maybe automate the updates. So sounds good. I guess the changelog changes. We opened this a couple of weeks back, well, 3 weeks now. I know Michael has gone through and actually implemented some of these on, I think it's on a 12.17 release. Maybe I should open that and we can take a look to see what people think of that. Michael, I don't know if you want to summarize this or would like me to just scroll through them.
Sorry, I just arrived. What's the topic?
The changes to the changelog that you've kind of prototyped for 12.17.
Yes, sure. I also did it for the last 14.2. I used the same format. So, well, for the notable changes, there's nothing really special. I just added, I mean, for each change, I created a title, then used the place under the title to write some text explaining what the changes are. Sometimes I think it's nice to have also little code examples. So that's what you see here for async local storage. And I also added this contributed by line at the end with the reference to the pull request. Or yeah, multiple pull requests if that applies.
Mm-hmm.
This is excellent. This is really, really good.
got some more of those. And
yeah, and for the other changes here at the end, it's when I didn't have time or any idea for a better for a longer format, so I just put them like that with no title. So that's more like the other changes are more like what we are used to do, what we used for previous releases.
For you also separate. I wonder if I can click on the changelog. You also separated the
yeah,
like
the changelog is below in the pull request.
Oh, okay.
It's in another comment, so that's easier to update. Ah, yeah, but now it's hidden.
We'll find it. There it is.
Yeah, so I kind of used what you did for the last major releases. So I separated Semver Minor and Semver Patch. And I went a bit further by also having a section for documentation fixes. And the last one, which I call other commits, which are internal changes to benchmarks, tooling, and tests that shouldn't apply to what we actually ship in the binary.
Yep.
This is definitely a huge improvement over whatever we had before. And I know, like, especially the top part is probably the most important, and it's the most difficult to get. I guess we need to have a pull request open for a while to get all the information together so that other people could also contribute some examples as we did here. And so maybe we should try to open our draft just a little bit earlier in the future.
Yeah, and adding the teams or contributors to see if they can provide a short description.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed.
I'm wondering if there's a way to easily capture the text that's going in here. If, for example, we would then port that particular change to another release line, whether it'll be easy to find this text or whether we'd have to go find the other release that landed in and copy it out of it. Because at the moment, that's not going to be associated with a particular pull request, is it? It's only going to be in this release proposal. So only things like examples. It's all good, useful information, but it is only in the release proposal and not directly associated with the pull request that it applies to.
I guess retrospectively adding the notable change label to any of the PRs here may remind us to go looking to see, oh, it was listed as a notable change.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And then you can kind of like go back and see which release it was pulled into and see what was written about there, maybe. I wonder if that would, it's not the easiest train of thought to follow, but like, for example, this would have the notable change. Oh, it already does, but.
Yeah, and actually this pull request landed earlier in, I think 13. But this particular way of putting it in the changelog only exists for 12 because it wasn't done before.
I guess going forward, like aiming to get this together for the current release line makes sense because then we'll always have it written to copy over going forward. Cool. I guess in general, it seems people are very happy with the kind of suggested changes. I don't know if we want to formalize that we want the change logs to look like this, like the breaking down into doc and internal commits in the releases guide.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to formalize it. There's one thing that I'm not really sure about. It's how we should transfer this to the commit message, because with the previous format, it was quite easy to do. But now I don't think it's really a good idea to copy paste this huge text to the commit message.
Yeah.
So that would need to be defined how we do it.
Yeah.
Probably get away with just putting the titles, maybe, rather than the whole text.
Yeah, maybe title and contributed by in these PRs if that exists.
Yeah.
So could you quickly show what the changelog itself looks like with all of this?
Trying to zoom down. Wow, there's a lot of commits.
What we cannot see here is how it looks like on the website.
Yeah, that's fine.
Where's the change
Look
log?
at all those replace me's.
That didn't help. Did you want to look at it in
Yeah, if you could just scroll down really quickly. I'm just wondering what the so those are the notable changes, and I was just wondering what then the commit section looked like.
so minor patch?
So yeah, it looks like before, just with reordering and adding titles between the sections.
Okay.
So we could easily change the changelog maker to output this, I think.
Okay. And then you just put minor and patch in separate categories?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Okay. So I guess we'll try and keep that up. I don't know if we necessarily need to sign someone up for writing, formalizing this in releases MD, but if anyone does have time to do it, I'll add some links in this issue actually to the new layout that Michael's kind of proposed. It sounds good. Definitely improvement. Thanks, Michael. And we've kind of gone through the 14 release plan. Guess it's worth just opening the 12 plan. So where are we? So the minor that Michael's preparing, 12.17. And for 10, it's going into maintenance on the 19th of May off the top of my head. So we may want to do a release in the meantime. Maybe there's time zone changes and the OpenSSL changes could be bundled up in a small release. Does anyone have time to volunteer for that one? Or once the PRs are open, I may be able to collate them all.
I might be able to as well.
Cool. Okay, I guess we'll just see how long have we got before maintenance? 7th, like 10 days. Yeah. Feel free to ping on the issue a little bit closer if we have time. And I guess the last thing, this was tagged release agenda, but it didn't seem to automatically add itself to the issue. But with the release tags, when we cherry pick to master, it's just making sure we provide the array of versions that the feature was added in. So you'll typically only see conflicts when you're preparing an LTS release. But it's just kind of a reminder to add the whole array of new versions. I didn't realize that. I thought we just overwrote them originally, but yeah. I think, yeah, this included a PR to the release doc as well, I think, to remind us to do that, or Michael created one of those.
Yeah, it's now in the release docs.
Yep. Yeah, I know Anna went back and added them, so thanks for doing that. Awesome. Okay, is there anything else anyone wants to discuss, talk about today? Any particular issues? I've gone through the recently open ones. This is node issues. We're not going to go through all of those.
Maybe the nominating Ruben for LTS team. It's been open for almost a month.
Yeah, we've all got +1s.
I don't know what's the procedure here, if we have to vote or just nobody objects and that's it.
I
think that's it.
Yep.
You just got to onboard.
What's the onboarding process other than adding a team or?
Yeah, I think maybe just adding to the team.
Okay. And rerunning NCU team and putting the PR in. Cool.
I guess it would be good if someone else would prepare one of the LTS releases with me, at least for the first one I do. So,
where are we with LTS releases, I guess? $12 signed up for a while, 10 is in maintenance. So I guess the maintenance LTS releases are kind of less interesting because they're just a few patches and there's not like the PRs that were open, we tend to just merge them all in because they're opened during maintenance for a reason. So I guess 10 would be the earliest one. But it would mean you'd be able to do a security release if one was to pop up in the meantime. I don't know if that's something you'd be interested in doing on an LTS release.
I could.
Yeah, I just realized like at the moment we only have one active LTS release line.
And the security ones, it should be pretty much identical to the current though. And the other releases, it's more like the cherry picking is a little bit different, but that's the only actual difference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
And the auditing.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Oh, one last thing, I guess. Do people think it would be worthwhile the release working group having a session at the Collaborator Summit, the remote Collaborator Summit in June?
Is there something urgent that we have to discuss in more detail? Because otherwise I'm not aware that we have something pressing.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same because nowadays we kind of get through everything we want to discuss in the working group calls, unless there was, I don't know, a dedicated like automation focus or maybe a SitGym focus. But for the regular kind of policy stuff, I think the working group meetings kind of cover those. So I don't think we need an additional time. But I don't know if anyone had any other ideas for like a dedicated session on a particular topic or something.
I think I agree with that assessment, to be completely honest, and the fact that we also have like the mentoring sessions once every 2 weeks too. Like, I think that it's, at least in my opinion, others may disagree, I think that we're in a position where we can leave the time for the summit for other teams that need to build more collaborators and stuff. Feels like we have like a good amount of of momentum. I guess maybe the only thing we may want to consider doing would be running one of those sessions like the Tuesday sessions that we run during the Collaborator Summit, just in case we want to expose some more people to it, would be the main reason we may want to consider it.
Okay. I'll double check the calendar because it might turn out that the session aligns anyway and we can just publicize it a bit more. But I'll have to check the calendars.
Yeah, making like just advertising the release working group would probably be a good idea.
Awesome. Okay, were there any other issues kind of on our list that people would like to use the time to speak about?
We might want to go through our issues again and close a couple because probably multiple are not up to date anymore. For example, do we have to keep open the 536 12.16.0 postmortem? I know things went badly at that point of time, but I guess we've spoken about it, and I guess we should just go ahead and close it. And it's just something that draw my attention when looking at the view right now. But I guess there are more and like that.
Yeah, I think that was on me. I just need to link to the minutes where we mentioned it.
Right.
And close that. Try and get to that.
I think we have, for example, also done with trimming the release list.
Yes. I'm not sure if there's anything on build to delete some keys. But I can ask Rod and close it. Let's go to the next page, ancient ones. I think probably the defining a word for all current releases might be able to be closed.
We never really came to a conclusion, right?
Yeah.
Wes popped into the build working group meeting this week to talk about stuff they've been talking about in package maintenance, where they had a similar thing about having words to describe releases, and that was from the point of view of trying to get version managers to adopt it. So there was some common terminology about long-term support releases and whether they were in maintenance mode or not. But it was kind of pretty new to everyone in build. He just popped in and said, hey, there's been some discussion in the package maintenance working group, and I've not really been attending those, so I don't really know the context around that. But for example, he was talking about there's some tool in PKJS that scrapes things like the schedule and the index JSON files to try and come up with whether at a particular point in time a release line is in maintenance or not. But yeah, it all ties in with that sort of consistent terminology. So that thing about defining that issue about defining the word for current releases, it goes beyond us, I guess. It's sort of leaking out into the ecosystem.
I think I think the last update to that, we made sure that package maintenance terminology and ours was in line with each other.
Yeah.
So I think that is the case, but I can double check and maybe close that. Awesome. Okay. Is there anything else anyone wants to raise today? No?
I guess, Miles, while you're here, I don't want to put you onto the spot, but I was just thinking the dropping of the flag for experiment for ESM modules on 12. Is there any danger that anyone that isn't opting into ESM might be affected? So for example, if you were including another module, could you suddenly start seeing a difference in behavior because that flag is no longer required?
So
it's
kind of.
It's one thing if you've opted into ESM, but I'm wondering if you didn't think you were opted in, but now that flag is no longer required, whether, for example, you might pull in a dependency that behavior now changes.
So the potential behavior change here, and I think that it needs to be taken with a grain of salt, but you know, if the release team has a problem here, it's a very good time to voice it. Unflagging ESM also essentially unflags package exports on 12. And so the like observable change for people would be if you were using packages that shipped with both a main entry and a package exports entry, you will start getting the package exports entry point instead of main. Now, I think that there's two different ways to consider this. Where I'm landing on it right now, and I recognize that it is a shift, is the packages that are introducing exports tend to be kind of bleeding edge packages, and exports can be introduced in a way that are semver minor. They can be done in a way that don't have don't have breaking changes. And the breaking change of the exports is more of a breaking change to the interface of the module, not to Node itself. So with that in mind, you know, like if people have projects that are using exports and that breaks people on 12 and they get issues, it's pretty straightforward to make small augmentations to the package exports to fix whatever broke in a semver patch, or alternatively revert it and introduce the exports in a semver major. I know that this isn't perfect, and I know that it's a little wavy, but I don't think that it's any different than introducing any other new feature API. So like we're backporting other APIs.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure there, because my worry from an LTS point of view is you have something installed that works a certain way, and then you upgrade Node and it works, you know, it might. It's all theoretical, right? Because unless we actually go in and evaluate every single module out there, we don't know. But the point is, if you suddenly get a shift in behavior, then what we're saying, that if you've got one of these dependencies that has got a broken exports for some reason, you're then relying on that module updating itself in a timely fashion, because we have no escape hatch. Is that right? That unflagging, there's no equivalent flag that says please put the behavior back to how it was before. Yeah, there's no experiment.
I agree, but
yeah,
but it's arguably following the interface that the module author has created.
Yes, but
for what it's worth, like we had this exact same change land on 13 during the life cycle of 13.
Yeah, but
I understand that it's different for LTS.
Yeah, I am aware that there are people that don't touch current and they just sit on the LTS releases.
The
alternative
here is that we never have unflagged modules on 12, which then means multiple years of modules not being a valid target for folks.
Yeah, no, I'm just being ultra cautious here because, you know, like I said, this is an LTS now. You know, it's not like this will become LTS. This is in LTS, and basically we're going to shift the behavior on people without the option of going back to the behavior they had before. So there is the potential here that we are going to cause breakage. Whether that's on us to fix or the actual module authors to fix, you know, that's another discussion. But you know, if we're going into this, you know, if we go in with our eyes open and say, okay, we accept that we're going to possibly break some scenarios. Well, if we're happy with that, that's fine. But if not, then the only thing I could suggest would be to either introduce another flag or have something on that experimental modules flag to just say, well, the default is to enable ESM, but you know, we provide you with an escape hatch to disable it, so that it's back to how it was if you didn't specify it. If you were on the older release line and you weren't specifying experimental modules. But I guess that'd be.
That's not necessarily it's not necessarily a bad idea. So I guess like a suggestion that you're having is like rather than removing the flag, we keep the flag but set the default to true?
Well, I'm assuming that
Or
we've kept the flag and made it a no-op, because removing a flag is not a good idea in a release.
Yeah, we've kept the flag and it's a no-op, but we've removed all the mechanisms of where we were checking for the flag.
Right. I'm wondering if it would make more sense to just have it as a default and then have some mechanism to switch it off.
Or an alternative flag.
Yeah.
Disable modules. Or I guess really what we'd want, to be honest, here, because it actually has nothing to do with ESM, it's exports.
Right.
What you're asking for is a disable exports flag.
If that's the only thing that could affect people, if that is the one thing that is going to change observably. Yeah.
So I mean, for what it's worth, and I think maybe this is even something to consider proposing to the modules team as a whole, kind of like thinking of this out loud.
Yeah.
Disable exports seems like, depending on how gross it is to put into the source text, maybe it's something we should consider just having.
Fair enough.
I guess it goes in two directions. Like on one, I can imagine anything around disabling exports being like a bunch of checks in the resolver, which is gross, and we probably wouldn't want to maintain that. So I could see a reason to have that target. I could see how you have the target just be 12 rather than having to maintain this flag forever. But I could also see people being annoyed if you can only do it on 12 and you can't do it on 14, and now it becomes a reason not to update.
I mean, I think for 14, it's fair to say that the behavior is consistent, right? If you were on 14.0 and 14.1, 14.2, the behavior has been as is since 14 was released. The issue with 12 is obviously 12 went out with ESM behind a flag. If it's it doesn't have to be the whole of ESM, but if it's the observable change is the package exports, then I'm not opposed to having that on by default as a change. But the worry is that if that does cause people problems, we have no way of switching that off. So if you happen to be affected by that, your options are either to roll back to an earlier version of 12 or to wait for a module update from the maintainer of your dependency.
Technically, you could also roll back the module that is broken to a version that doesn't use exports.
Node. Yeah, I guess this is the point, Michael. Thank you for saying that. Is if it breaks, it's not a problem with Node; it's a module author problem. It's the module has
I've seen a lot of. We have this problem with Node GYP where it's hard to convince people that it's a problem with the modules they're using and not because as far as the person encountering the problem is concerned, the only thing they've changed is the version of Node. The fact that they have a latent bug in one of their dependencies that is only surfaced because we've changed something, they don't really care about that. They just care about, I had something working and now I've changed something and it's broken.
Yeah, but that can happen with any server patch change that we do to Node. I think that may be more likely with other changes.
But
there's two examples here right now from the 12 release line of exactly this happening, where for gRPC builds got broken because of a change to streams, which seems to have unearthed the latent bug in Needle. So I guess, Richard, my thoughts here, and I can be flexible. I'm not trying to be stubborn. I think that we should push this out. I think that, yes, there is room for breakages, but I think that the majority of those breakages are actually rather easy to fix. And we've seen folks who introduce exports in a way that break people quickly revert them in the ecosystem already, such as the is-promise circumstances that happened. I don't think that we're going to be seeing people kind of massively doing this in breaking ways because it would already be broken on other release lines. I am hesitant to introduce a flag to either turn off modules or turn off exports because It's gross. It creates a pattern that I don't think is great. And it creates an inconsistency between the LTS versions that have these features that I just think is going to be confusing for folks. With that being said, I would be willing, if we release this and there are massive breakages and people can't adopt it and tons of issues, I think we have a clear path forward of adding a flag to disable exports. But I would like that to be our fallback, not our default. Is that something you think you could get behind?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy with that. Like I said, I don't know enough about modules in order to say how much of a problem. It's all a theoretical problem. It might be that no one has any issues. It's just, yeah, it's just the fear that because this is LTS, it's the, you know, what if the worst happens? What are we going to do? And if it is that we would then have to push out another release, you know, with a flag, or maybe it is, you know, if it is only 1 or 2 modules, then we put the onus on the module. But it's kind of, yeah, I'm happy as long as we've considered the implication.
Yeah, so it's been discussed. I think personally, I'm okay with the risk. I know that it does risk us burning some of our credibility, and you know that's why we should have buy-in across this whole team about doing it. And thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah,
I think that the risk is tolerable personally, and it feels like we have a clear plan to mitigate that, to mitigate it if it does prove to be an ecosystem problem, and the solution is not overly complex.
Okay, yeah, I can get behind that as long as we document that in the minutes.
Does anyone else have any thoughts around that?
It sounds like a good plan, and I guess we'll be running SitGym. Maybe we should try and maybe unflake some modules to see how SitGym is with that change in particular.
Yeah, probably is a good idea. I mean, we run
SitGym is running right now on the proposal branch.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll add it to the minutes. Oh, we're at 2 minutes too, so I guess I'll leave that there. I'll try and get the PR to minutes open probably tomorrow now. And thanks for joining, everyone, and speak to you all later.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.